I don't know why that just did that. A little irksome that it just did that. Also wondering why it took so long for my music to stop. Ooh, what? What am I hearing back? Aha, that's how. Cool. All right, I figured out where my echo was. I don't know if any of you guys have realized this or not. What the fuck is going on with OBS? OBS, my lads, what is the matter with you? Does my transition still work? That's still working. Give it a shot. Yeah. Let me give this a shot. There it is. Wow. Awesome. Awesome possum. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to this ANP live stream of doom. I gotta tell you, it's this past basically since February has been a lot, and I haven't really shared this. I haven't really talked about any of it at all, really. But I had a lot happen, and a lot has happened with me health wise since I started doing a lot of these, since basically the beginning of 2026. So needless to say, because of this health problem that has arisen, I've basically been MIA, or I feel like I've been MIA. I haven't really been MIA. Basically since the whole thing started. So I have absolutely nothing laid out right now. We still have one episode left to watch as of the recording of this. We have one episode left to watch of Monarch. And I will say this, I have been enjoying it immensely. I've been watching it with Jim. And when Lucas finishes watching it, I am hoping that we will have a live stream like we did for season 1 over on the main channel, but now it'll be over here. So I am looking forward to that. And I was able to make a video also taking a look at that new awesome teaser for Godzilla Minus Zero. And so that's also on this channel. But I have been a very sick puppy. And I still technically am a sick puppy. Right now I'm battling with my insurance on a couple of things. Those fuckers. But that's all being dealt with on the other side, on the medical side of things. Needless to say, what has happened is they put me under every steroid under the sun for about 2 months. And I've gained all the weight. And this is what's irking me a bit. And I could talk about this on this channel just because I kind of like this channel quite a bit. And this channel is more of the variety channel than it is than the other one is. My main channel again now is exclusively military history, film history, history in general. Well, this is more of the variety channel. This is more of what ANP used to be. It was a business choice, quite frankly. And they put me under every steroid under the sun to try to help this problem. That didn't help. But in the process of doing so, I have literally gained all that weight that I had lost, a few years back. And I am so angry over that. Very angry, very upset, very unhappy with myself. As a result of that, only for, you know, it to find out that those steroids that they just pumped me with for, I don't know, at least 6 weeks. At least 6 weeks of taking these really, really, really strong steroids. That they didn't work at all. They only were masking the problem. And so then they just take me off of those completely. Which they were kind of tapering me off of them anyway, so the withdrawals weren't too bad. But they were there. And needless to say, here I am. And so essentially what happened was a doctor put me on a weight loss medicine because I needed to lose more weight. Ironic that the opposite were to have fucking happened. But nevertheless, my body had a horrible, nasty reaction to it, which I broke out head to toe with hives. And I mean head to toe with hives. And it wouldn't go away. They just were not going away. And they still, to this day, have not completely gone away. Now they're isolated just to my upper arms, which is wonderful. I'll tell you that. This is the best I have felt since this all started back in February. And now they've diagnosed me with chronic hives in general because apparently my immune system just doesn't want to shut off the fact that it's sending the histamines out into my body and blah, blah, blah. Now they have me under every antihistamine under the sun, which just made me a little groggy, despite them trying to tell me that it wouldn't do this. It 100% is doing that to me. So I have not been... It has been a lot, and I haven't been able to do anywhere near as much as I have done. The only thing that I have been able to really partake on and sort of indulge myself in terms of, creatively and with these channels really is I've been writing my books. I've been working on my books like there's no tomorrow, and I wrote, I think within, you know, that window of time since I started breaking out with hives and everything, I think I wrote around 350 pages of stuff, which is the most I have ever written in any sort of stretch of time. So that's the only thing good, I think, to really come from any of that. So it has been a lot. I'm really tired right now. I'm really getting back into the swing of things. Has not been fun here, but because I have absolutely fucking nothing to talk about right now, right? I know that Monarch is out, and if any of you in the audience want to talk about Monarch, sure, I'll be willing to talk about what I know. I still haven't seen the final episode because I'm waiting on my friend Jim, because we've been watching it together, and I don't want to go ahead of him. Also been watching BoJack Horseman with Antonio and Steve, who have been on this channel several times. And I've been enjoying that immensely as well. We're about to wrap up season 1. It is what it is. That all being said, I'm actually doing okay. Like, if I really look down to the nitty-gritties, I'm actually doing okay. Despite physically kind of feeling like shit and feeling bad that I've gained a lot of the weight that I had lost back, emotionally, I feel better than I have in my entire life, ever since I can remember, at least since high school. So there's that in the very least. So, also doing some redecorating. I've rearranged my set a little bit, sort of flipped it a little bit. Now the background isn't quite done yet. There's going to be a new shelf back there with DVD with my physical media, not just DVDs, my physical media collection I intend to put back there, as well as a couple of other things that I plan to put on the back wall as well. And I think this actually helped fix some of my audio issues, is rearranging this set around. There's not as much of a empty room echo as I've noticed in the past, so I think my audio has already improved exponentially. Speaking of audio, let's get this show on the road, shall we? Okay, so I recorded the audio already. So I'm going to go into Premiere. I want to get this done. Thank you. D-Man, I haven't seen you around here forever. Thank you for your concern, D-Man. Glad you could be here. We're going to create a new project. You guys don't really need to see the monitor or anything because I'm just importing some audio really quick. Where's my Tid Roosevelt? There's my audio. So just to sort of spoil it, this new documentary is essentially it's a D-Day documentary. And what was happening was I was reading, what the heck was the book called? Give me a second, I can pull it up really quick. There's my script and there's my link. God bless archive.org. I think that is the best website ever. I was reading a book. The book was called Utah Beach, the Amphibious Landing and Airborne Operations on D-Day, June 6, 1944. I was reading that book. And in that book, I found a story, as one does when reading a lot of history books. And I kind of wanted to just do a video on it. And so I'm hoping to have this released. On June 6th. To sort of celebrate the birthday and everything like that. And this was Theodore Roosevelt Jr. and his escapades on Utah Beach. And again, Utah Beach doesn't really get talked about too much because it was significantly less bloody than the hell that was Omaha Beach. But it is it was a fun story. I wanted to kind of tell it. So what I want to do here, and again, this is all I'm doing. So I have my basic denoise filter that I use within Audacity. However, I prefer the one that we have in Premiere. Yeah, you have frustration. What does it sound like without that? See, I prefer the one in Premiere, the noise filter in Premiere, largely because I can edit it on the fly. While on Audacity, it's a bitch to do that with. So that was pretty simple. It's probably going to say, yeah, my ANP Gaming was my last spot. I don't need that. Bring here, reviews. Whoa, I got too much shit. Too much shit. There should be. Audio denoise. I want my MP3. Where are you, MP3? You were here somewhere. You were there. You are there. Because I'm still a simpleton and use Vegas Pro. You see, here's why I use Premiere. The biggest reason why I use Premiere is because, well, I think Premiere, it's immensely easier to edit YouTube Shorts and TikToks with Premiere than it is with Vegas Pro. However, when I'm editing all of my big shit, including my Zulu documentary and everything like that, I just use Vegas Pro because the big reason is I think the audio capabilities and the audio tools that Vegas has far outshines anything Premiere has, and it's all right here. And that includes like a 5.1 surround sound mix if I want it. Which I've edited now a few movies with that. Channels. Make that left only. Fuck it. I want to hear it back. Okay. And now I want to do track effects. And make my little valley. Okay. Once again, I'll probably have Antonio go through. Probably Antonio and Steve. They'll go through and they'll do some voiceover work. Yeehaw. I'm going to bring myself up full screen really quick because I got to pull up the stream and I want to bring the chat up so I can see it a little easier. So right now I'm just using my confidence monitor and that's pretty small. So. A video just popped up on my feed. Was it really Grouchy's fault Napoleon lost at Waterloo? No, it wasn't. It wasn't Grouchy's fault. Spoiler alert. It was not Marshal Grouchy's fault. There we go. I have pop out now. Well, you're way bigger than me, DM. You're way bigger than me, man. Even on the main channel. Even though now we make very different content. Okay, let's get back to this. I don't like that, but it'll do. I might have to go back in with the audio editing tool in Premiere. Might like to do a noise gate, but we'll go with that later. The more I read about Theodore Roosevelt Jr., the more I like him. God, what is it? What is it with the Roosevelt family? Holy shit! They are true badasses. True badass. Ugh. See, I'm also very happy now that my stuff, if I want it to, has a home outside of YouTube. Now, with the streaming service History Fix. A couple of my documentaries have been flagged on YouTube, so I had to edit. Basically, I had to censor them. In particular, my Bridge at Remagen documentary because it had a certain Austrian painter with a silly mustache featured in it for a little bit, and so the uncut versions are actually available online. They're just available via that streaming service. Yeah. So Theodore Roosevelt Jr. he was 56 years old, all right, during D-Day, right? Being in the first wave, all right? So first off, I think he was the only general to actually be within the first wave at anywhere on D-Day. If he wasn't the first general, he was without a doubt the oldest general to land in the first wave on D-Day. And at 56 years old, total badass. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah, trim. Yeah, cut that. Cut it. Cut it. Cut it. Cut it. Cut. I gotta cut that. Now, forgive me, DM 1954, but I believe your stuff is exclusively Godzilla related. I would get very bored of that very quickly, as much as I love my Godzilla still. At least with my network, what I like to call it. I have my history channel, which is variety in of itself, but just history related. Then I have this channel, which is whatever the fuck I want to post on it. And then now I have my gaming channel. That's actually a good idea. I might as well do this now. Where the fuck are you? Ted? Oh, Ted! There you are. Teddy? Oh, Ted! I think I'll cut that. What I'll do is when it comes time for the video, this will be replaced with actual video of me. Yes, Godzilla Kiru, I have seen that your channel has been growing. My congratulations, my friend. That's where the title card will go. See, the good thing about having a channel your size, Godzilla Kira, is that you can be you can be pretty varied in your content until you find your audience. Fortunately, how YouTube works today is the more focused your channel is on a very specific thing, oh, Jesus, fuck, the more likely it is to get picked up. Oh, it would help if I unmuted this thing. Yeah,
it would be.
go.
But it wasn't his success in World War I. Refused. But it wasn't his successes in World War that made him famous, but refused. But it wasn't his successes in World War I that made him famous. It would be his efforts in the next great war that brought him great fame. Famous. It would be his efforts in the next great war. Famous. It would be his efforts in the next great famous. It would be his efforts in the next great war that brought famous. It would be his efforts in the next great war that brought him great fame. And also made it so Ted could easily meet the big shoes established by his father. In North Africa, Roosevelt quickly became known as a in North Africa, Roosevelt rapidly.
Too many R's.
North Africa, Roosevelt that brought him great fame. In North Africa, Roosevelt quickly became known as a general who liked
too many
front.
Words.
Roosevelt quickly became known as a general who liked being at the front. Many knew Ted as a man in the trenches. As one GI noted, quote, General Roosevelt loved soldiers. He was a soldier's general. He preferred functionality to formality, often considering his men's looks and his own second to their ability to fight. This brought him into direct conflict with General George S. Patton finding Ted and Ted's men sloppy and too unkempt for the U.S. Army.
When I read this, first off, I didn't even realize he was a general over in North Africa. But secondly, the moment I remember reading about this part of Ted Roosevelt's life, because I also read Ted Roosevelt Jr.'s life, because I also read a biography on him called Son of the Lion, which is a great title, by the way. That's a great title. But I also read there that, I was like, he's going to run into problems with Patton immediately. And I was not disappointed, because Patton was very prim and proper when it came to the uniforms and the cleanliness of his soldiers.
General Roosevelt at one point. But ultimately, it was General Omar Bradley who would relieve him. For similar beliefs to Patton. But ultimately, it was General Omar Bradley who would relieve him for similar beliefs to Patton.
Also a reminder that in North Africa,
Ted was
Bradley was the junior, while Patton was the senior. Come Overlord, it was the other way around.
Ted was then transferred to Sicily, joining forces in Sardinia. He then partook in the invasion of Italy. He then partook in the invasion, transferred to Sicily, joining forces in joining forces in Sardinia. He then partook in the invasion of Italy. There, he worked as a liaison officer for the French army and General Dwight D. Eisenhower. All throughout this portion of the war, he begged Eisenhower. All throughout this portion of the war, he begged Eisenhower for battlefield command once more. Come February 1944, Ted finally got his wish. He was placed under Major General Tubby Barton's command in the 4th Division of the 7th Corps. His role more ceremonial than of importance. Ted proudly adorned on his uniform a triangle with ivy leaves. Ted finally got his wish. He was placed under Major General Tubby Barton's command in the 4th Division of the 7th Corps. His role more ceremonial than of importance. Ted proudly adorned on his uniform a triangle with ivy leaves, which is why his division was nicknamed the Ivy Greens. But most of the Army knew the 4th Division simply as the Fighting Fourth. This is something the Lion's son was immensely proud of. The 4th Division fell into part of 7th was immensely proud of. The 4th Division fell into part of 7th Corps. 7th Corps was commanded. The 4th Division fell into part. The 7th Division was part of 7th. The 4th Division was part of 7th Corps. 7th Corps was commanded by General western flank of the proud of. The 4th was part of 7th. The 4th Division was part of 7th Corps. Immensely proud of.
Pacing.
The 4th Division was part of 7th Corps. 7th Corps was commanded. 7th Corps was commanded by General J. Lawton Collins, who in turn got his orders from General Omar, who commanded the U.S. 1st Collins, who in turn got his orders from General Omar Bradley, who commanded the U.S. 1st Army. Their task was codenamed Utah, and they were to seize the western flank of the invasion. Break through the German defenses, then capture Cherbourg. Break through the German defenses, then capture Cherbourg. Invasion. Break through the German invasion. Break through the German defenses. Invasion. Break through the German defenses, then capture Cherbourg. Then capture Cherbourg. Then capture Cherbourg, which contained a port the Allies could use to make their landing. Which contained a port the Allies could use to make further landings.
Nice.
Which contained a port the Allies could use to make further landings. Thus commenced some of the most rigorous which contained a port the Allies could use to make further landings. Which contained a port the Allies could use to make further landings. Thus commenced some of the most rigorous training these American soldiers had ever experienced. Through the terrible Thus commenced some of the most rigorous training these American soldiers had ever experienced.
I really wish I had a different narrator. I really do.
Through the terrible weather and countless days of practice, Ted made sure to partake in every moment. It put ever experienced. Through the terrible weather and countless days of practice, Ted made sure to partake in every moment. Ted made sure to partake in every moment. Ted made sure to partake in every moment. It pushed his failing health to the limit, but perhaps through sheer willpower, he suffered through it all. It pushed his failing health to the limit, but perhaps through sheer willpower, he suffered through it all. He suffered through it all. Sheer willpower, he suffered through it all. Sheer willpower, he suffered through it all. Sheer willpower, he suffered through it all.
Because I really do hate the sound of my voice. I really do.
And come June 6th, 1944, he felt ready to partake in the Normandy landings. And come June 6th, 1944, he felt ready to partake in the Normandy landings. Or he felt ready to partake in the Normandy landings. He felt ready to partake in the Normandy landings. The day prior, Ted also learned that his son Quentin landings. The day prior, Ted also learned that his son Quentin, a captain of the 1st Division, would also partake in the invasion, but on a different beach. Ted also learned that his son Quentin, a captain on a different beach.
This would be Quentin Jr. or Quentin II, because the first Quentin died in a plane crash in World War I.
His designation was Omaha. Quentin boasted that he'd be taking part of the first wave, something which made Ted enormously proud. Something which made Ted enormously proud. Wave, something which made Ted enormously proud. Wave, something which made Ted enormously proud. General Roosevelt was 56, something not lost to General Barton. As much as he liked Ted, he didn't dare allow the man to partake in the first wave. Barton. As much as he liked Ted, he didn't dare allow the man to partake in the first wave. Should a Roosevelt be killed under Barton's watch, many questioning eyes would fall upon him, no matter the circumstances. This infuriated and deflated Roosevelt, feeling it his duty to be part of the fighting. He petitioned many times, writing in one letter, quote, "The force and skill with which the first," writing in one letter, quote,
Yeah, Godzilla Kiru. The Arrow Gamera box set is one of the best box sets I've ever seen.
Writing in one letter, quote, "The force and skill with which the first elements hit the beach," quote, with which the first elements hit the beach and proceed may determine the ultimate success of the operation. With troops engaged for the first time, the behavior pattern of all is apt to be set by those first considered. That pattern of all is apt to be set by those first engagements. It is considered that accurate information of the existing situation should be available for each succeeding element as it lands. You should have, when you get to the shore as it lands, an overall picture as it lands. You should have, when you get to the shore, an overall picture in which you can place confidence, or an overall picture in which you can place confidence. I believe I can contribute materially on all the above. Picture in which you can place confidence. I believe I can contribute materially on all the above by going in with the assault companies. Furthermore, I personally all the above by going in with the assault companies. Furthermore, I personally know both officers and men of these advanced units and believe that it will steady them to know that I am with them. With this letter, Barton reluctantly granted Ted's request. Like his father with the Rough Riders, Ted would lead his men into the thick of battle once more. Before the invasion, General Bradley...
My favorite part of those discs, Godzilla Kiru, well, one, the artwork is consistent from beginning to end. That's big. But also, I love the special features. Some of the audio commentaries are better than others. But I love the plethora of them. And I learned a lot about the Gamera movies from those audio commentaries.
Before the invasion, General Bradley, General Bradley, before the invasion, General Bradley had called all his commanders to a briefing. Bradley said, quote, "Gentlemen, this is going to be..." General Bradley had called all his commanders into a briefing. Nearly 1,000 men attended in one massive hangar. Bradley said, quote, "Gentlemen, this is going to be the greatest show..." Bradley said, quote, "Gentlemen, this is going to be the greatest show on earth. You are honored by having the ringside seats." Someone behind Bradley suddenly exclaimed, "Ringside hell! We're in the arena." It was none other than Ted Roosevelt. This caused boisterous laughter to fill the hangar. This caused none other than Ted Roosevelt. This caused boisterous laughter to fill the hangar. It indicated to Bradley the hours on June 6th. This caused boisterous laughter to fill the hangar. It indicated to Bradley that not only was morale good, but these men were ready and eager to begin. It was 0100 hours on June 6th when Ted boarded the Barnett, the vessel transporting his men to Utah Beach, and he ensured he'd be amidst his... They said the Barnett, the vessel transporting his men to Utah Beach, and he ensured he'd be amidst his soldiers.
I need that.
They sang songs together, some including "Onward Christian Soldiers" and "Battle Hymn of the Utah Beach." And he'd be a beach, and he ensured he'd be amidst his soldiers. Beach, and he ensured he'd be amidst his soldiers. They including "Onward Christian Soldiers" and "Battle Hymn of the Republic." Already he felt the arthritis in his legs screaming for him to slow down, to take a break. But the stubborn son of the lion would never, and he used his now famous cane to support his weight.
Oh yeah, he walked everywhere with a cane. I mean, personally, I would think that badass if I was fighting alongside him.
Already he felt the arthritis in his legs. Already he felt the arthritis in his legs screaming for him to slow down, to take a break. But the stubborn son of the lion would never, and he used his now famous cane to support his weight. Something else had been ailing Ted, something he'd kept quiet. Take a break. But the stubborn son of the lion would take a break. But the stubborn son of the lion would never, and he used his now famous cane to support his weight.
Kappa! Yes, of course, Godzilla Kiru.
Something support his weight. Something else had been ailing Ted, something he'd kept quiet. Something he'd kept a secret. Something he'd kept quiet. He'd been having something he'd kept a secret. Since Sicily, he'd been having terrible chest pains. He feared a heart condition and decided to keep his ailment to himself, not consulting any doctors, not even his wife. If a soldier commented on his pain to not consulting any doctors, not even his wife. If a soldier commented on his pained expressions or gait, Ted would put on the same smile he'd learned from his father, the sight reassuring all those who'd seen it. Ted would put on the same smile he'd learned from his father, the sight reassuring all those who'd seen it. Despite these troubles, Ted was determined to be with his men on the first landings at Utah. For this, he'd be the oldest man and only general to hit the beaches on the first wave. Utah. For this, he'd be the oldest man and only general to hit the beaches on the first wave. H-hour was 0630. All across the massive invasion, featuring the mighty coalition of American, British, French, Canadian, Polish, and many more allied nations, the liberation of Europe had begun. For Ted, the Higgins boats began launching, and things progressed. Polish and many more allied nations, the liberation of Western Europe had begun. For Ted, the Higgins boats began launching, and he'd be right in the front one, and he'd be right in the front. Things progressed so. For Ted, the Higgins boats began. For Ted, the Higgins boats began launching, and he'd be right in the front one, and he'd be right in the front. The troops having difficulty, and he'd be right in the front. Things progressed slowly. The troops having in the front. Things progressed slowly. The troops having difficult climb. Oh my God. The troops finding it difficult climbing down. The troops having difficult climb. The troops finding it difficult climbing the netted ladders. Progressed slowly. The troops finding it difficult progressed slowly. The troops finding it difficult climbing down the netted ladders amongst the tumultuous Atlantic waves. These waves would also make driving these small Higgins boats difficult, something which would become apparent once the first ramps lowered. Now aboard his own Higgins boat, a soldier saw Ted wearing his life vest. But he hadn't any weapons of note. He asked the Roosevelt answered vest, but he hadn't any weapons of note. He asked the old general what gun he had. Roosevelt answered with a smile, quote, "I've got my pistol, 1 ammunition clip with 6 rounds in it, and my walking cane. That's all I expect to need. And my walking cane. That's all I expect to need." When another soldier tried to help him, Ted barked, "Get the hell out of my way. I can take it as well as any of you," earning laughter from his otherwise frightened and seasick troops.
Fucking badass.
About 250 yards from the beach, Ted's boat hit a sandbar. Despite the driver's best efforts, they couldn't dislodge themselves, nor get an inch closer. The front ramp also refused to lower, and a lieutenant beside Roosevelt shouted for his men to move. Together, they all leapt over the sides of their boat and straight into shoulder-deep freezing water. Into shoulder-deep freezing water. Into shoulder-deep freezing water. Into shoulder-deep freezing water. Quote, into shoulder-deep freezing water. Quote, as one sergeant noted, quote, "Run." Quote, "You couldn't run. You could only kind of push forward." Freezing water. As one sergeant noted, quote, "You couldn't run. You could only kind of push forward." Some of the men, notably the radio ops, had to abandon much of their equipment. Their guns, notably the radio ops, had to abandon much of their equipment. The men, notably the radio ops, had to abandon much of their equipment, their guns and belts significantly weighing them down amidst enemy fire.
Godzilla Kiru, do you prefer Gorgo or Gappa?
Enemy fire.
That's my question
They
for
made
you.
the right call in keeping their radio equipment. And keeping their radios. But they made the right call in keeping their radios, which would soon be needed. All in keeping their radio equipment. It was quickly discovered that they made the right call in keeping their enemy fire. But they made the right call in keeping their radios. But they made the right call in keeping their radios, which would soon be needed. It was quickly discovered radios, which would soon be needed. It was quickly discovered that the current had caused many of the Higgins boats to land further south of their intended landing zones. Ted noted this in his letter to his wife. Quote, "The moment I arrived on the beach, I knew something was wrong." Landing zones. Ted noted this in a letter to his wife. Quote, landing zones. Ted noted this in a letter to his wife. Quote, "The moment I arrived on the beach, I knew something was wrong. Roosevelt later described the scene. "We passed a capsized craft,
Holy
some
fucking
men
shit.
clinging to it,
I'm so tired.
others bobbing in the waves. Something was wrong. We passed a capsized craft, some men clinging to it, others bobbing in the waves. As we peered over the gunwale, upper edge of the boat, the shore seemed nearer, but veiled as it was in the smoke and boat. The shore seemed nearer, but veiled as it was in the smoke and dust of the bombardment, it was hard to make out. Suddenly the beach appeared before us, a long stretch of sand studded with wire and obstacles. Several officers began noting that the German defenses seemed less than what they'd expected. Many of the defenses had been destroyed during the initial Allied bombardment, and only a few mortar and machine gun entrenchments were present. Those who practically swam their way to the shore took cover behind a sea wall. Ted made the correct decision in not carrying a heavier weapon, for his pistol is all he had. He unholstered it when he found his footing, and in the opposite hand was his cane. He waved all. Ted made the correct decision in not carrying a heavier weapon, for his pistol is all he had. He unholstered it when he found his footing, and in the opposite hand was his cane. He waved the men forward, seemingly ignorant to incoming fire. We splain. He waved the men forward, seemingly ignorant to incoming fire. Roosevelt wrote, quote, "We splashed and floundered through some 100 yards. Of water while Roosevelt wrote, quote, through some 100 yards of water while German salvos fell. Yards of water while German salvos fell. Men fell. Men dropped, some silent, some screamed. Salvos fell. Men dropped, some silent, some screaming. Up salvos fell. Men dropped, some silent, some screaming. Up the 400 yards of beach we ran. Then we reached a seawall. The CO, some screaming. Up the 400 yards of beach we ran. Then we reached a seawall. The company CO with whom I was, Captain Howard Lee of E Company.
See, I don't understand why Gargo gets so much love. I really don't. And I think technically it is a vastly superior movie to Gappa. I really do. Because that end attack sequence on London is just phenomenal looking and presented in the best possible way. I mean, special effects were handled by Eugene Laurie, and he's one of the best miniature effects guys in the industry, period. It's no wonder why he was chosen to direct that, especially considering he also directed The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms and The Giant Behemoth. But the thing that Gappa has that Gorgo failed miserably at, this is truly my hot take. The character of the monsters. Gappa blows Gorgo out of the water. Like, I actually gave a shit when the Gappa parents reunited with baby Gappa. In fact, I was quite moved by it. It's a big scene. It's a big deal. While in Gorgo, they just kind of appear, and then they turn around and walk away. Now, another thing that I think Gappa has going for it that Gorgo just does not is that the Gorgo suit is the same as Ogra, his mother's. They only had the budget for one monster suit, so they're exactly the same. While if you watch Gappa, there are three very distinct suits. You could tell which one's female, you could tell which one's male, and then you can also tell which one's the juvenile, not just from the height, but just from the simple design. That's awesome. I love that shit. And Gorgo just doesn't hold a candle to it. I think presentation-wise, Gorgo's a better movie, though. Overall.
Captain Howard Lee of E Company, a great tower of a man.
I need to re-record
Captain
that.
Howard Lee of E Company, a great tower of a man.
I need to re-record this because it wasn't Captain, it was a Major.
Captain Howard Lee of E Company.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I don't know. I don't even know if I can agree with you there. Because there's also a bit of a difference between what type of movie Gorgo is versus Gappa. Gappa is a spoof, first and foremost. It's kind of a parody of the giant monster genre.
A great tower.
Gorgo is a very straightforward movie.
A great tower of a man, led his troops splendidly. A great tower of a man. He with his men, a great tower of a man, led his troops splendidly. He with his men started into the dunes to attack the strong points. Splendidly. He with his men started into the dunes to attack the German strong points. Major Tabb, who was nearby Major Lee's as Roosevelt described, noted what he saw. Quote, Roosevelt was striding along with his walking stick and ignoring the stray small... Quote, Roosevelt was striding along with his walking stick and ignoring the stray small arms fire and fragments of mortar and artillery shells. His calm, businesslike demeanor was certainly a staying influence on all those who saw them. His calm, businesslike demeanor was certainly a staying influence. His calm, businesslike demeanor was certainly a staying influence on all who saw him. He also rousted out a lot of laggards. From the shelter of the sea wall. And got them moving forward. Saw him. He also rousted out a lot of laggards from the shelter of the seawall and got them moving forward to join laggards. From the shelter of the seawall. From the shelter of the seawall and got them moving forward to join their units. From the shelter of the seawall and got them moving forward to join from the shelter of the seawall and got them moving forward to join their units. These laggards were likely men confused and lost, and trying to regain their bearings. Hardly anyone landing where they were supposed to. They were looking for landmarks that simply weren't there. Namely, German artillery. German artillery began shelling the beach at random. It left most of the GIs on edge, fragments slicing through the men, the explosions mostly maiming instead of killing there. Namely, German artillery began shelling the beach at random. It left most of the GIs on edge, fragments slicing through the men. It left most of the GIs on edge, fragments slicing through the men, the explosions mostly maiming instead of killing. The Germans also had a considerable amount of snipers positioned through the dunes overlaying the Utah landing zone. Roosevelt noticed a house by the seawall. According to the photographs he'd studied before the zone. Roosevelt noticed a house by the seawall. According to the photographs he'd studied before the invasion, According to the photographs he'd studied before the invasion, he knew then they'd landed much further away. According to the photographs he'd studied before the invasion, there shouldn't have been a house there. There shouldn't have been a house there at all. Away than expected. There shouldn't have been a house there at all. He knew then they'd landed much further away than expected. But how much?
If you want to see the Gappa story presented in a much more straightforward kaiju film, watch the movie Gargantua. It was a sci-fi original movie, made for TV movie. Has some decent practical effects, and the CGI is pretty dated. But it is literally just that story retold. Follows Gappa a little bit more than Gorgo, but it is that basic story, and I recommend it.
All. He knew then they'd landed much further away than expected. But how much? He surged forward, crested the dunes, and found a windmill by the house. According to Roosevelt, he did recognize this windmill. This proved to him that they'd landed a mile further south than they'd wanted. This proved to him that they'd landed a windmill. This proved to him that they'd landed This proved to him that they'd landed a mile further south than this windmill. This proved to him that they'd landed a mile further south than they wanted. Now he needed to begin coordinating with the other officers to warn them of their predicament. But there was a lot of confusion on the beaches still, and Roosevelt needed to find a radio. Oh my God.
That was sexy.
But there was a lot of confusion on the beaches still, and Roosevelt giving a deal of. But there was a lot of confusion on the beaches still, and Roosevelt needed to find a radio operator. And fast. The first Shermans began landing now, rolling forward, giving a great deal of reassurance to the men of the first wave. Ted saw this and sought their officer, a man named Commodore James Arnold. He began a man named Commodore James Arnold.
I need to re-record that too, because he is actually a captain after further research.
He began waddling over to him in the murkies. He began waddling over to him through the mucky sand when a shell fired from a German James Arnold. He began waddling over to him through the mucky sand when a shell fired from a German 88, sending both men off their feet, sending both men off their feet, sending both men off their feet, sending both men off their feet. But they'd survived. Sending both men off their feet, sending both men off their feet. Fired from a German 88, sending both men off their feet. They survived, but they survived, hunkered behind one of the many obstacles the Germans had erected, Hemmerbolken, sending both men off their feet. Hunkered behind a Hemmerbolken. A Hemmerbolken. Both men off their feet, but they survived. German 88, sending both men off their feet, but they survived, hunkered behind a Hemmerbolken. To keep landing craft Bolken, one of the many obstacles the Germans had erected to keep landing craft from getting too close. This gave them some reprievement. And Roosevelt gathered multiple lieutenant colonels. They studied a map, trying to ascertain where they'd landed. No easy feat. Behind them came the next wave of Americans. The troops now landed. No easy feat. Behind them came the next wave of Americans, the troops now landing in earnest. With these waves came Colonel James Van Fleet. Van Fleet described his initial landing. Van Fleet described what he found on Utah Fleet. Van Fleet described what he found. Quote, "There was lots of small arms fire on Utah Beach. One of my sergeants was killed by machine gun fire just as the landing waves. One of my sergeants was killed by a machine gun. One of my sergeants was killed by machine the land beach. One of my sergeants was killed by a machine gun just as the land. Oh my God. One of my sergeants was killed by a machine gun. One of my sergeants was killed by machine gun fire just as the leading waves touched down. From ashore beach. One of my sergeants was killed by beach. One of my sergeants was killed by machine gun fire just as the leading waves touched down. Together, Van Fleet and Roosevelt brought forward a radio op, and Arnold called into their commanding general. Quote, "I am ashore with General Roosevelt, advancing steadily." Colonel Van Fleet wanted more information. Ted said, quote, "Van, we're not where we're supposed to be." They came to the conclusion that they had two options. They could shift their entire landing party over a mile south to adhere to the original objective, or they could continue from here. Together, Van Fleet and Roosevelt decided to proceed from where they were. Ted said, quote, "We'll start the war from right here." An American legend had been born. An American legend was born. An American legend was born. While other soldiers were separated from their companies, NCOs confused, officers lost, Roosevelt moved up and down the beaches, pistol and cane in hand, waving them forward, pointing them in the right direction, never stopping, never caring that his life was in grave danger both from without and from within. The physical exertion he experienced was tremendous, and his legs screamed for him to stop, his chest in considerable pain. But he never wavered, and wouldn't, thinking of his father. He kept directing his men forward, guiding them onward up and over the beaches. The house Roosevelt had spotted earlier proved to be a blessing in itself. He wrote, quote, "I had to hide beaches. The house Roosevelt had spotted earlier proved to be a blessing in itself." He wrote, quote, "I had to left to right and back again, setting up various COs straight and changing the task. Stevie, First Lieutenant Marcus Stevenson, Roosevelt's aide, of course was with me, devoted and competent as always. His Tommy gun ready to defend us, Roosevelt's aide, of course was with me, devoted and competent as always. His Tommy gun ready to defend us if it became necessary. His Tommy gun ready to defend us if it became necessary. We sent up a tiny PC with always. His Tommy gun ready to defend us if it became necessary. Always. His Tommy gun ready to defend us if it became necessary. We sent up a tiny PC with my radio behind the wall of a house. General Barton eventually made landfall in the final waves. There he met with General Roosevelt. He recalled, quote, "While I was mentally framing orders, he had landed with the first wave, had put my troops across the beach, and had a perfect picture of the entire situation, just as Roosevelt had earlier promised, if allowed to go ashore with the first wave. I loved Ted. When I finally agreed to his landing with the I loved Ted. When I finally agreed to his landing with the first wave, I felt sure he would be killed. When I bade him goodbye, I never expected to see him alive. Sure he would be killed. When I bade him goodbye, I never expected to see him alive. You can imagine then the emotion with which I greeted him when he came out to meet me near Les Grandes Dunes. He was bursting with information. Upon the arrival of reinforcements, Roosevelt stood there waving his cane, directing them on. One eyewitness, Malcolm Williams from the 12th Infantry Regiment, said the general greeted them with a big grin. General Roosevelt, you boys like the regiment, said the general greeted them with a big grin. General Roosevelt reportedly asked them cheekily, quote, "How do you boys like the beach?" With this, the stunned and weakened German defenses began to wane, and by midnight, Colonel Van Fleet radioed to General Barton, quote, "Defenses not stubborn." It became rapidly clear that where Roosevelt and the first wave had landed was a better place to springboard their efforts than what was planned. The tanks came rolling in, along with thousands upon thousands of U.S. troops who firmly secured their beachhead. 21,000 American soldiers landed on Utah Beach by the end of the day. While the 82nd and the 101st Airborne had suffered great casualties over the previous night, the landing force had 589 casualties, with 197 killed. For the 4th Division, D-Day had gone better than expected. Stephen E. Ambrose then wrote in his journal, quote, "Credit belonged to Generals." Quote, "Credit belonged to General Roosevelt and his colonels." Meanwhile, to the north, at Omaha Beach, Ted's son was surging forward with the infamous first wave. While resistance on Utah Beach division Meanwhile, to the north, at Omaha Beach, Ted's son Quentin was surging forward with the infamous first wave. While resistance on Utah Beach had been considerably light, the first wave on Omaha suffered some of the highest casualty rates of the battle, higher than expected. They dealt with higher than expected tides, many losing their equipment in the current, mines, high ground, narrow passages, and pillboxes. After many long and agonizing days of fighting and slow advances, Ted's 4th Division eventually helped seize Cherbourg. They discovered many bunkers full of vital supplies such as ammunition and food. Ted saw it his men were fed well that night. After the initial invasion, the American sector had been secured. Eisenhower needed someone to help organize local authorities, with the Allied commanders now surging into the region. He chose General Roosevelt. By July 10th, Ted was all but collapsed with fatigue, and a medic needed to give him some By July 10th, Ted was all but collapsed with fatigue, and a medic needed to give him some sleep. Ted was all but collapsed with fatigue, and a medic needed to give him some sedatives to sleep. When he awoke, medic needed to give him some sedatives to sleep. When he awoke, Ted said to his wife that, quote, "I was almost as good as new." But that couldn't be further from the truth. When he awoke, Ted wrote to his wife that, quote, "I was almost as good as new." But that couldn't be from the truth. On July 11th, he received word that a captain wanted to speak to him.
Almost.
At first, Roosevelt felt annoyed, only begrudgingly agreeing to see whoever it was. What he didn't expect was seeing his son Quentin standing before him. It was 7:30 p.m. They talked throughout the night, happy they were both alive. Quentin described his father as being, quote, "fit, healthy, and unscathed." Fit, healthy, and unscathed. Fit, healthy, and unscathed, but filthy. Ted and Quentin together would be a moment in military history itself. Together would be a monumentous moment in military history itself. Together, they'd be the only father-son duo to partake in D-Day's first wave at Normandy. To partake in D-Day's first wave at Normandy. To partake in D-Day's father-son duo to partake in D-Day's first wave at Normandy. To partake in D-Day's first wave. Roosevelt returned son duo to partake in D-Day's first wave at Normandy. All seemed well. Son duo to partake in D-Day's first wave at Normandy. All seemed well. But when Captain Quentin Roosevelt returned to Division HQ, he was told Normandy. All seemed well. But when Captain Quentin Roosevelt returned to 1st Division HQ, he was told the news he least expected. Theodore Roosevelt Jr. had died of a heart attack. Quentin wrote to his mother, quote, "The lion is dead." For his valor on D-Day, Ted was awarded the Medal of Honor. The citation read as follows, quote, For his gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the Medal of Honor. The citation read as follows, quote, For intrepidity at the risk of his life, for his gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life of Call of Duty on intrepidity at the risk of his intrepidity at the intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the Call of Duty on 6 June 1944. At the risk of his life above and beyond the Call of Duty on 6 June 1944 in France, his valor, courage, and presence in the very front of the attack, and his complete unconcern at being under heavy fire inspired the troops to heights of enthusiasm and self-sacrifice. Although the enemy had the beach under constant direct fire, Brigadier General Roosevelt moved from one locality to another, rallying men around him. Roosevelt moved from one locality to another, rallying men around him, directed and personally led them against the enemy. Under his seasoned, precise, calm, and unfaltering leadership, assault troops reduced beach strong points and rapidly moved inland with minimum casualties. Reduced beach strong points and rapidly moved inland with minimum casualties. Assault troops reduced beach strong points and rapidly moved beach strong points and rapidly moved inland. Reduced beach strong points and troops reduced beach strong points and rapidly moved inland with minimum casualties. I hope you all enjoyed this tale of Ted Roosevelt Jr. and his heroism on Utah Beach. I hope you all enjoyed this tale of Ted Roosevelt Jr. and his heroism on Utah Beach. As we remember those who lost their lives on D-Day, June 6th, 1944. Thank you. As we remember those who lost their lives on D-Day, June 6th, 1944. Thank you very much for watching and listening. If you liked what you saw, we have more history content available on the channel. Links to all of our social media are also available in the description below. Thank you for watching.
Okay.
In the description below. Thank you for watching.
Okay. So I have a couple things I need to fix. Might be able to just do it right now.
The company CEO with whom I was, Captain Howard Lee of E Company.
Captain Howard Lee. Captain Howard Lees of E Company. Captain Howard Lees of E Company. Pause that. And what was the other one? It was this guy.
A man named Commodore James Arnold.
A man named Captain James Arnold. A man named Captain James Arnold. A man named Captain James Arnold. Okay. Noise reduction. I'll grab that there. Effect. Noise reduction. Get noise profile. Control A. Noise reduction. Okay. Now, export WAV. Should be right there. It is audio. Now let me bring this back up. Control S. Let me bring in those files.
Captain Howard Lee of E Company.
Captain Howard Lee
led his troops splendidly. He with his men started into the dunes to the German strongpoints.
A man named Captain Howard Lees of E Company,
whom I was,
Captain Howard Lees of E Company,
a great tower of a man, led his troops splendidly. He with his men started into the dunes, German strongpoint. A great tower of a man, led his troops splendidly. He with his men started into the dunes to a man named Commodore James Arnold. He began waddling over to him through the mucky sand when a shell fired from a German 88, sending both men off their feet. But they survived, hunkered behind. He began
a man named Captain James Arnold.
He began waddling over to him through the mucky sand, sought their officer.
A man named Captain James Arnold.
He began waddling over to him through the mucky sand when a shell fired from a German 88, sending both men off their feet. But they survived, hunkered behind a Hemabolken, one of the many obstacles the Germans had erected to keep landing craft from getting too close. This gave them some reprievement, and Roosevelt gathered multiple lieutenant colonels. They studied a map.
See, what I'll do now is I'm going to take this, and I'm going to turn this into the podcast audio. This is just barely made the mark for having its own podcast. This will be reviews. Ted! 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 In fact, I'm going to make this is probably a good use of practice right there. Anyways, it's just creating its own folder to begin with. Render. I got to remember to click that checkbox when I come back, though. And then, while I haven't made a thumbnail for the podcast version yet, I can at least render the audio waveforms that I can use. And I'll show you how I do that. And then I'll probably call it a night because I am exhausted and want to go to bed. All right, see. Go to AV. Reviews. Here's my Ted Roosevelt podcast.
Everyone knows of the old lion, Theodore Roosevelt.
There's
Bully,
my audio.
his slogan. The man who
So
carried a
now
big stick.
I'm going to
But
download.
most don't know his son, Theodore
Export.
Jr., nor that his son had
Let's go
taken
to
part
reviews.
in
Find.
that fateful day on June 6th.
We'll find. Where are we here? Ted.
Today we regale you with his story. How Theodore Everyone
save
knows
that.
of the old lion, Theodore Roosevelt. Bully.
Make sure it's muted so that way I can commence with other projects. Cool. So now what I gotta do is I gotta go through this, figure out the quotes, and I gotta reach out to Antonio and Steve to see if they couldn't provide some voiceover work for the quotes. I think that's a pretty good pattern that I have within my videos, and I would like to continue that. Well, that's about all she wrote for me, gentlemen. I am fucking exhausted. I am very, very, very tired. Wednesdays are always my busy day. So I am going to sign off here, get ready for bed, and so on and so forth. Thank you all for watching. Those of you who have, all my social media is, of course, in the description below. I really should start pimping out my Discord, but haven't yet. I'll make sure to put a link to that in the description as well at some point. We tend to have movie nights on there. And everybody, take care.